We find out that she's a part of this coven, the midwives coven, and that they have made a deal with this demon, or maybe even multiple demons, to pretty much take the soul of the first male born into the family. And this demon in particular, Toby, that the girls are interacting with, has been waiting for quite a while, it seems, because there is not really, evidence that a male has been born yet. And that is a crucial part, because then it becomes generational with each of these movies, since the demon is pretty much possessing and haunting them for a majority of their lives until one of them bears a son, which we do see happen in Paranormal Activity 2 with Christy bearing Hunter, and that being pretty much the targeted soul that Toby wants to take and use as his human form to get onto Earth, essentially. It's a pretty out there explanation, but it is cool to have that lore and make those connection points. It does make the franchise more interesting, and I kind of wish they focus on that rather than going for the jump scares and kind of the found footage angle for each of the movies. I wish they delved into it, because they do with one of the spin-offs, the marked ones, which I'll be talking about shortly. I think that one does give a lot of explanation and a lot of background for the lore, and I appreciate that a lot. So of course things go, really haywire for the family. Dennis, the stepfather, and Julie, their actual mother, end up dying, and as a result, Christy and Katie are then raised by Grandma Lois, which gives the explanation for Paranormal Activity, where they don't really remember much of their childhood, and they were with their grandma a majority of their life. And Paranormal Activity 3 fills in that answer. And then from there, we could jump into Paranormal Activity 2, where we pick up with Christy having her son and living with her husband Dan and Dan's daughter Allie Ray, who is actually a pretty crucial character, and I think a great character overall, because she's the only one that really goes to investigate what's going on after the events unfold in her family's house, with Toby targeting Christy and Hunter and trying to instill fear and succeeding in this and taking control of Christy. But in retaliation, Dan figures out that there's a way to transfer the soul to another member of the family. They unfortunately choose Katie, even though most of them, Allie is really against it, and it ends up being done anyway. So then that leads into the events of Paranormal Activity, where we find this demon attacking Katie and Mika and at their home, and that's the reason why, because Dan transferred it pretty much, and that's how everything pretty much started. It's pretty wild, and it's actually a cool way to really flesh out that story and that narrative. But unfortunately for Dan and Christy, they end up getting freaking killed, snap neck, and then Christy gets thrown against the camera, with Katie escaping with Hunter, and we don't know the whereabouts until Paranormal Activity 4. So we come to find out in Paranormal Activity 4 that Hunter has now been adopted by another family, the Nelson family. They rename him to Wyatt, and there is an older sister in the family named Alex. So she begins to notice things are a little weird with Hunter, aka Wyatt, and she begins kind of capturing things on camera. And with the push of her boyfriend to kind of investigate it, they begin to find out more and more things. And then to make matters even worse, Katie and another child actually appear next door. She too has a young child with her, a young boy named Robbie, and Robbie is able to become acquainted with Wyatt just because Katie is able to fake sickness and convince Alex's mom to watch Wyatt while she deals with whatever she came up with. And it's clearly a trick and a ruse by the demon that's presumably still in control of Katie and possessing her. So it's a pretty cool way to further the story. So more and more things begin to go wrong at the Nelson's household, with Wyatt and them seeing more things, more so Jesse seeing more, or sorry, not Jesse, Alex seeing more things. And Katie is shown to be actually possessed and manages to kill not only her family but also her boyfriend and take a young Wyatt along with Robbie into the house next door. Alex tries to follow them, only to run into a group of witches, forcing her into the house, where she comes face to face with Katie, and Katie is clearly possessed and charges at her, attacking her and presumably killing her, thus ending Paranormal Activity 4, where she's accomplished taking her sister's son, Hunter. And that's where that story comes to a halt, because we end up going to a spin-off with a different family that has connections, but it's not really the same family. So we pick up with that in The Marked Ones. So Paranormal Activity, The Marked Ones begins in Oxnard, California. We follow the family of Jesse. Jesse has just turned 18, just graduated high school, and he is pretty much, living the high life right now until things start to go, wrong for him, just because by association with the neighbor who's suspected to be a bruja, which is also known as another witch. A fellow classmate of his is also kind of in association with this witch. That classmate is valedictorian Oscar, and he's been acting pretty weird. He comes out there startled and scared and ends up running back into Jesse and his friend Hector late at night, where he presumably killed the neighbor, and the neighbor has been suspected to be a witch. And it turns out that upon them investigating what has happened in her apartment, they find photos and altars and other weird, demonic stuff connecting her to the midwives that we've seen in the previous films. So on top of that, Oscar runs into Jesse again, clearly possessed, with his eyes blacked out, looking really sickly, tells him that he's pretty much been a mark. And then it becomes apparent that it's no coincidence that this is happening to Jesse, as they find photos in the witch's apartment of, Jesse's mom pregnant with Jesse at the time, and also in the picture is Grandma Lois. So they all were in association. This was just another faction of the same witches that was targeting young mothers and pretty much getting them, convincing them to sacrifice their son's soul in exchange for, riches. And one thing I kind of want to point out about this film is that the dad is seemingly absent from a lot of the events, and it's made apparent that he works in a hospital, but still, I would think that he would be more involved. So I feel like he knows something that his son obviously doesn't, and that's something that I wish they kind of explored more, maybe hinted at more. But that's just a side note. Things become more and more worse for Jesse, Hector, and his other friend Marisol. The grandma of the family tries to help out and goes to do a local priest and try to get a ritual done for Jesse, but it ends up only making him worse. And she eventually, unfortunately, gets killed by Jesse, possessed Jesse, and Jesse disappears, leading them to need answers. They seek out Ellie Ray, whose number they found in Oscar's room, and that brings us to Paranormal Activity 2, because she was actually a survivor since she wasn't present when Katie came and killed the mom Christy and her dad, and took Hunter. So she's been researching this midwife's cousin. She explains the symbol on the stomach and what it means, and it's pretty much a mark for possession, and that it's with them throughout their life at different stages, referencing the number 666. So pretty much when they're 18, at that point, it's already taken over, and when they get possessed, they'll look normal and look like the person, but it won't be them, because Toby or whatever demon will already be inside of them. So that's a pretty nutty way of explaining everything and why these demons are even targeting, these males and whatnot, and it's just for the spoils of riches. So that's really crazy. And The Marked One does a great job of giving a lot of explanations. So now we know what exactly the coven is and what their goal is and what they're doing, and it's pretty freaking crazy that it's spanned out to this point. I wish they showed more of that and did maybe another spin-off rather than trying to do something a little more roundabout with the next entry, the Ghost Dimension. But I also want to point out that the ending of Paranormal Activity, The Marked Ones, is probably one of the best ones I've seen out of all of them. He goes through this crazy portal doorway, and it proves that time travel does exist in this story, and that they can travel to certain points in time of, Katie and Christy's life. And it does explain some events, and it's just a great way to tie it together. And I haven't really seen the Ghost Dimension. I've seen parts of it, but I haven't been able to sit down and watch it myself yet. So with that in mind, I did read the plot and I read some spoilers and how it connects. So I do appreciate that they do explore that, the point of time travel and how they're able to go to certain years in the family's lives and whatnot. And it was a pretty good entry in terms of that. The way that the Ghost Dimension connects to the other Paranormal Activity movies is one in the house that they live in. The family that's here, I believe they're the Fleege family. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing their last name right, but regardless, where they live is the same property where Katie and Christy lived in Paranormal Activity 3 with their actual mom before all that crap went down and the grandma took them away. So that's one way that it connects. Another way that it connects is that the daughter of the family was born the same year as Hunter, and there is a connection between the children since they are both viable options, I'm assuming, for the demon to take hold of, which is another interesting aspect, because they don't necessarily go right away for a male soul if they don't need to, or if the family hasn't produced a male soul, considering that the demon Toby waited with Katie and Christy up until Christy was able to conceive Hunter. So that's also an interesting thing about the franchise is some of the lore is kind of missing, so we're just kind of filling in pieces as we go, but it's fun to do so. I mean, at least I think so. And also the tapes that Dennis was able to record in Paranormal Activity 3, that's almost like a portal for young Christy and young Katie to interact with the present, and that's also due to the powers that the demon is able to give off while they're haunting and possessing the girls. So that's another weird revelation that we get, in that the midwives and anybody connected with that are able to teach the children, since they're pretty much the vessels between the demons and the actual spirit, the real world. So I think that was cool. Still have to watch it though, but I mean, it sounds like a great entry, and it sounds like it does do some good for the franchise, so I'll definitely check it out. Overall, I think this franchise was a pretty solid franchise for the horror genre itself, and also the found footage style. I kind of just wish they got rid of it at some point. I think 6 movies with the same gimmick is a little too much. I think it would have benefited more if they went a different route and maybe used Steadicam instead. But other than that, I think the lore was really well written. I think the choice to release it out of order as far as how it connects and how the actual timeline works for the story, that was pretty well done. And I think the cast does a good job of reacting and showing genuine scares. And I do love the sound that they created, especially when you see it in a movie theater. At least if you remember those experiences, they were pretty fun. So kudos to that. Again, I think it's a strong franchise. I hope that with the new sequel that they announced, either that it's connected and they drop the found footage gimmick and they choose a different route, or it does have a connection but it's not necessarily correlated with Christy and Katie and the Featherston family and the midwives. I mean, obviously the connection would be to the midwives, but some other story could be formed out of that. So we'll see. It's going to come out next year, and that's pretty much right around the corner. We're already halfway through this year, so look out for that. It's on the horizon. Again, it is a fun franchise. It does have a lot of great moments and a lot of genius scares and camera rigging systems, and they're just fun movies. I mean, they scare you, they get your heart racing, so definitely go check out and kind of read about the lore and the story, especially if you're like me and you like to connect everything that you're kind of given, even if it's not given to you on the full plate and it's kind of separate. But that's what made this franchise fun for me, at least, is that you could connect all the pieces that each movie gives you and really get a linear story as to what and how everything's happening and what actually started it. So I think that's a fun way to go about these movies. And again, I think they all did a great job with what they were given, and each premise kills it and executes the story and only adds more to the story. So I just want a little more from this franchise, because I do think it could be a lot better than what we got. So hopefully, fingers crossed, 2022's Paranormal Activity is a game changer like these were back in 2007 and so on. And with that in mind, I'm going to end the video right here. That'll be the end of this spoilers talk and discussion. You have my thoughts and my views on everything, and I hope you guys had a good time listening to me ramble. So yeah, and just a friendly reminder for you guys to smash that like button. It helps the channel grow in ways that you don't even know. So do that. Leave some comments on what you guys want to see me do videos on. And for all my new faces out here, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so that way you guys get all the updates, and I'll catch everybody on the next video. Thank you.